Let's do this. My name is Panagiotis Menegos. I'm a journalist and radio presenter, and I'm co-curating SNFCC Sessions. Invite some really interesting persons to talk about music and other things. Tonight, let's go back to year 2004. What do you recall of it? We hosted the Olympics. We won Euro. Everyone has a story to tell about where they were when we scored the winning goal at the final. There were national elections. The government changed. Some people got for the very first time in touch with a small device called iPod that changed completely our relationship with music. I graduated university and moved to England for a while. You know what we have all in common? We danced like crazy to the debut album of a band that came out of Glasgow, Scotland, Franz Ferdinand. And what made us more curious about it was that their frontman, this strong figure, this charming man, had a Greek surname. So please, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Alex Kapranos.
Kalispera.
I'm sure he understands more Greek than he says, so watch out what you're saying. How was 2004 for you? What do you recall? Were you here for the Olympics? Have you cheered for the goal of the final, the football final?
I do. It's funny you talk about that story. Remembering that winning goal, I was in a field in Denmark for the Roskilde Festival.
Okay.
And we had just played in the afternoon, and there was this torrential storm, a bit like the weather today, but multiplied by 1,000. And this field, they had this field where they had the huge screen where they were showing the football game, and the mud was about up to there, and I had carrier bags, you know, like bin bags tied around my legs, mud up to there. Then
typical European festival.
Yeah,
typical
absolutely, yeah.
Glasgow atmosphere.
And I remember seeing the goal and like just like, oh, I can't believe it. And I think I was the only guy in the field like going like really, really crazy. It was like a field
gave a fuck about it.
A field full of Danish people. But I remember my phone going crazy as well and getting all these messages from friends and family members. But I remember particularly this message from my uncle Platon. And it was all capital letters and exclamation marks just saying, "This is the year of the Greek." And,
not the philosopher.
No, not the philosopher. Yeah.
Okay. So how was 2004 for you? It was a turning point for your life when the debut album of Franz Ferdinand came out.
Yeah, it was... I'd never really had a year like that in my life before. I'd been playing in bands for a long time. I'd been making music for a long time. And the kind of audiences I played to were usually 100 people at the most. If I ever made a record, it would maybe sell 500 copies if I was lucky. And then suddenly the whole thing exploded and became this totally different experience. I traveled around the planet, got to see all sorts of places I'd never been before. And yeah, people were dancing to our music. It was pretty good.
Dancing to music that girls can dance to, as you've said.
Yeah. So yeah, this phrase, when the band started off, we wanted to make, you know, just a sentence or like a line that summed up our attitude. And we came up with this line, which was a little bit glib. We're going to make music for girls to dance to. And
it's a catchy line.
It's a catchy
line,
worked. But it represented something that, you know, when you make music, most of what you do is you rebel against what is around about you at the moment. And Glasgow has always had amazing music, and there's been incredible bands that come out of Glasgow. But I guess we wanted to rebel against what was happening there at the time. And in the early 2000s, there was a lot of very serious post-rock. And I remember I had a lot of female friends, mainly at the art school at the time in Glasgow. And I remember asking, and none of them would ever go to gigs. And I remember saying, like, why don't you go to gigs? And they would say, like, well, because they're really boring. These gigs are so boring, and nobody ever dances to them. And they were right. There were these kind of, like, it was very post-rock and noddy, and like lots of guys with kind of like beards and strokey, and you know, it was just all fine. But,
Everyone knows that girls don't dance to Mogwai.
well, I wouldn't say Mogwai. I think Mogwai are an amazing band, and like I love Mogwai. But there was maybe a generation of bands that came after them that weren't as inspired as Mogwai were. And so yeah, I thought, oh, this is funny. I want to do the opposite of that. So we're going to make music that girls dance to.
Researching your past, I found that you have worked as a chef, a bartender, a driver, a music promoter. You did a bunch of manual jobs, such as a welder. Are they all true?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The weirdest job I had was I worked as a chainsaw wielding maniac.
Okay.
There was this thing called Terror Under the Arches. It was like one of these kind of theme park things, you know, where it's made up like a haunted house, and it was the kind of job that out of work that actors would have. And I used to have to dress up in a sort of prison outfit and wear a muzzle. And then people would go around this haunted house thing, and then they would get into this prison cell, and I would have to start the chainsaw. And the chainsaw didn't have the blade on it. It had no blade. It was just a chainsaw. So I would start the chainsaw, and then I'd run to the room waving it at all of the people in the room.
Any accident?
Well, no. You see, I couldn't hurt anybody because there was no blade on the chainsaw.
Okay.
But if you see somebody running in with a chainsaw that's going, you think,
it's not the most
I'm gonna
pleasant
die.
picture.
And I remember for the first 2 weeks, it was the most amazing job I ever had. I couldn't believe I was getting paid £8 an hour to do this job. But it became very boring after a while, and very cold. It was very, very cold.
Probably you don't remember it, but we did an interview over the phone like a decade ago for this supposedly third show of Franz Ferdinand in Athens, which was cancelled. And you were telling me, I checked out my archive, that there was a brief moment around millennium, let's say, that you were ready to quit before the success of the Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah, it's true.
Tell me more about these times of insecurity, of disappointment.
Well, so I'd been in a few bands before, and I was in a band called the Karelia, and they were signed to a label called Roadrunner, and we put out an album, and I think this album maybe sold like 200 copies, if we're very lucky. Like it was an abject failure, you know, like it was really bad. And we got dropped by the label really, really quickly, and by this point, I think I must have been like 26 or 27. And I was kind of thinking, all right, okay, that's me. I've had my chance, you know, like I'm in my late 20s. I'm too old to really, like, no label's ever going to sign anything. And so my perspective really changed. I kind of thought, I'm not going to be a professional musician. I'm just, and I guess I thought, when I make music now, it's just purely for fun.
For fun.
I'm just doing this because I enjoy it.
Self-expression.
I'm just doing it because I like making music. And I don't ever expect to pay my rent from the music that I make, but I'm still going to make it, I'm still going to enjoy it. And in a way, this was kind of the greatest thing that happened, because I don't think Franz Ferdinand would have happened if I'd had more of a, right, this is serious, this is going to be, because it's quite a, when we got together, it was quite an odd, quirky band. It was like, it wasn't really, on paper, it wasn't really a commercial proposition. Mm-hmm. It was just something that we were doing for fun, playing at parties and that sort of thing. And I don't think we would have had that attitude if I thought, well, maybe somebody was going to take this seriously.
15 years later, what would you call, what would you think that was Franz Ferdinand's secret to instant success?
You know, I think it's simpler than you think. I think we just had
some good tunes.
Had some good tunes, you know, and we enjoyed playing it. And for me, I think about what my favorite bands are myself. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to think that our band had some of those characteristics as well. So like, I think of like a band like the Cramps, or a band like the Ramones, or the Clash, or something like that. And they look like gangs. They look like you want to be part of that. And they look like they're having an amazing time, and you want to be part of their world. And we did. We had our own world when we started off with the band, and it's ours and completely controlled by us. And we were having a great time. Yeah,
and you had a complete control on your visual image, the looks. There were a couple of years that everyone seems to dress like you.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
skinny jeans, pointy shoes. Even the red dress on the cover of the second album were a thing back then.
No, it's for, yeah, I think a few people had the haircut for a while as well.
Yeah. What was like for you? Too much attention?
Yeah, a little bit, you know. It's funny, I think I share this characteristic with a lot of people who do what I do. Obviously I've met a lot of other people from bands, and I find that some of the biggest extroverts on stage are actually quite introverted off stage. Mm-hmm. So
are you that guy?
I would say so, yeah. You know, there are some people who will walk into a room and if they walk into a room at a party, they will possess it and will do crazy stuff and they will be the life of that party. And I'm not that guy. But when I get on stage, then I'm a completely different person. And no, it's not, that's wrong. I'm not a different person. It's a different slice of my personality that becomes amplified. And yeah, when I'm on stage, everybody of those thousands of people has to be looking directly at what I'm doing, and it has to be exciting and enigmatic and powerful.
But suddenly when
but off stage, I don't want to be looked at. No, I don't want to be
suddenly when the band exploded, you were on stage, but you were on the tabloids also. What Alex Kapranos is wearing, who's his new girlfriend. Yeah. How do you deal with that?
By avoiding it as much as possible. I think right from the beginning, like before the band or before anything, I made a conscious decision that I didn't want to be a celebrity. I didn't want to be, you know, the kind of person that turns up at celebrity events and do interviews about nothing and that sort of stuff. Like everything that would get me in the public eye had to be connected with the music that I was making or something that was part of the art that we were making. For me, that's the difference between somebody who's famous for their work and somebody who is a celebrity. A celebrity is somebody who's just, everybody knows who they are, but they don't know why.
Did it help you that you were 31, 32 years old and you were more mature and wise? I mean, you didn't
I don't know if I was wise.
You didn't have the age of Alex Turner when Arctic Monkeys exploded.
I think that makes a difference, you know. I would like to think so, because you're right. I was 31 when our first album came out. There's a theory that somebody told me that if you ever encounter some level of fame, it will put you into suspended animation, and it's like you retain the outlook of that age for the rest of your life. And so if you become famous at the age of 14, then it's almost like you stay like a 14-year-old for the rest of your life. And I'm quite happy staying 31 for the rest of my life. Mentally, yeah. That's
do you have a story when you realized that you were famous? Not a celebrity, but famous.
I remember the first time walking past somebody in the street who was whistling one of my melodies. That was really bizarre. Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you what, I do remember, you were talking about 2004. We'd been touring everywhere. I'd been touring so much, been to so many different places, and it'd been so busy. And it was Christmas, and I wanted to buy Christmas presents for my family. And it was at a time when I was very recognizable, and people would stop me on the street and, you know, to say hello or whatever. Which is fine, you know, that was very nice, but I just wanted to go into town and buy some Christmas presents. So I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this because it's going to be really difficult. So I thought, I'll get a disguise. I'll go into town with a disguise. So I had this pair of glasses that had false glass in them, and I combed my hair back, and I wore a weird jacket.
And you've kept the chainsaw thing? No.
I didn't have the chain. But I thought, yeah, nobody's going to recognize me, and I went into town, and just lots of people came up to me, so I said, wow, you're that guy from that band. Why are you wearing glasses? Why do you have... Yeah, so... Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you can go shopping tomorrow in Athens.
I will go shopping tomorrow. I think it'll be fun.
But you mentioned touring on the first album. Do you recall the first gig in Athens in Rodon Club? Because I know some guys among the audience find it unforgettable.
I do. It was a very intense and exciting moment. Some of my family were at the show, and yeah, to come back, because as you all probably know, I have Greek heritage. My father is Greek, and
We'll get into this later.
yeah. And I used to come to Athens, particularly Piraeus, a lot when I was a kid. And so to come back to Greece and to play with the context of the band was, it was amazing, and to have this connection. And also, I guess I'd been building it up a lot to the band. I've been saying to my, like, oh, Athens is going to be amazing, and Greek people have a lot of passion.
So it was special. It was special for you.
But the thing was, I was saying all this to them, and I was saying, like, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best show. And I was kind of like, God, this audience better be good. But they were. It was an amazing audience. Like, it was, yeah, one of the highlights of the career.
15 years later, 5 albums onwards, what's the secret of the longevity of Franz Ferdinand? I asked you before for the secret of the instant success, but now we are talking about a powerhouse name.
I think it's the same for any musician or anybody doing anything in life, or any artist. There has to be some level of personal stimulation and enjoyment. You know, I enjoy what I'm doing. I really love it. There's nothing else in the world I would rather do. And fuck, if that's your attitude, then yeah, of course you're going to keep going. You know, like, and I think that comes through as well. If you're I know, because I've seen musicians before, and I've seen musicians on stage, and I've thought, why are you there? You don't look like you want to be there.
Why you're absent?
Yes, yeah, you know, I've seen people, and it feels like they go, and sometimes I know why they go. They've got alimony to pay or something like that, you know, and fair enough. But for me, it's, yeah, I can't begin to communicate what kind of a thrill it is to be on a stage performing.
But you're into other things outside
course,
music. I mean,
yeah.
you even had a food column on the Observer.
Yeah, yes. It's
sound bites.
Yeah, it's good to have other parts of your life that are stimulating them. And yeah, I still love food. I eat almost every day, and but yeah, I used to be like you said earlier. I used to be a chef, and in fact, the band kind of formed in the kitchen.
Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah, because the band sort of formed with Bob Hardy as our bass player, and I was working in the year 2000. I was working as a chef in a restaurant called it was like the Groucho Club, the Glasgow version of the Groucho Club. And Bob was an art student at the time, and I got him a job as the dishwasher. And there are times in the kitchen which are really intense and really insanely busy, but then there are times that are not so busy when you're kind of waiting around. And I was in charge of two parts of the kitchen. I was in charge of the hot starters and the desserts. And because I was in charge of the desserts, it meant that I would be the last chef to leave. So you know when you go for a meal, and there's always that last couple, the romantic couple that are there having a night out, and they're dragging it on because they're really enjoying each other's company. Well, they're keeping the pastry chef there till the very end of the night, because he's waiting until they order their dessert. And so Bob and Bob was the KP, he was the dishwasher. So he would have to wait as well, because he had to wash their dishes when they'd eaten it. And so at that time, when we were sitting around in the kitchen, we would drink the cooking brandy and talk about this imaginary band that we would have. If we were ever going to get a band together, and we would talk about the things that we would do in this imaginary band. So say like, well, if I was in a band, I would make sure that I got on stage and I would meet the eyes of the audience, and I would never waver from doing this. And this is where the thing about the girls to dance to, think of like, and Bob was saying, I would make music that would make people so emotional that they would cry tears, like Field Marshal Haig when he read the results of the fallen coming through at the end of the battles at the end of World War I. And I would say, well, I would make music for girls to dance to. And so all these ideas behind the band, they formed in the kitchen. And so, yeah.
So what we've learned, do stay late at restaurants. Something good can come up. Do you believe in the concept of democracy within a band? Or there has to be a leader, a dictator to put things in order?
I wouldn't say it's either. I wouldn't say it's a democracy, and I wouldn't say it's a dictatorship, but I would say that because I'm a dictator, so...
So we'll get your answer. Any troubles with this philosophy?
No, I think you're more likely to have troubles if it's a total democracy. Usually, I find with bands it's more like a family, the way a family works. Everybody has roles, and everybody supports each other. Or it's like a gang, or it's like a group of friends. It's a dynamic where the relationship should be unspoken. You don't sit down and say the rules. You don't say, you're the secretary, you're in charge of this, you're in charge. It just happens and it evolves. And it happens and it becomes unspoken because you trust each other. Mm-hmm. And
someone has to have the final word.
But the thing is, like, it's not something that says, I'm the boss. I've never been in a band and said, I'm the boss, you will do what I say. Because if you do that, everybody's going to fuck off straight away. Like, who wants to be in a band with somebody that's like that? No, you don't do it like that. You do it in a way where you respect each other and you listen to each other. And there are some people who lead, like, say if I talk about my band, for example, like Bob loves lyrics, is fascinated by the lyrical content and how words will move you, but doesn't really care so much about the musical side of things. Mm-hmm. Like, he's a great bass player now and always has been, but for him it was always the conceptual side and what the words are saying to him, whereas Paul, who plays the drums, doesn't really care about that sort of side. And for me, I have this very strong relationship with Bob relating to the lyrics, and I will always discuss this with Bob. And whereas with Paul, I know the sound of our band wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the relationship that I have with Paul. And also with Nick as well, when he was in the band, the melodic relationship that we had, and now with Julian in the band and Dino as well. So you have different relationships with different people. And
so life decides the delegation of duties.
Yeah, and when I said I'm a dictator, I'm joking about that because I would never be in a band and say to people, you have to do it this way. It's, if you don't respect each other, then the band is over.
Mm-hmm. You said before that you started, every band starts as a gang, as a group of friends. After some periods of extensive touring, going all over the world, long flights, do you end up hating each other, even for a while? Do you need distance for each other?
Of course, blows fly. And I think that's the same for any friendship group or anything like that. Or it's the same for any relationship too. You know, sometimes things go well, but occasionally they don't go well. And yeah, we had our moments when things weren't good or things exploded because particularly when everything first happened for the band, there was a lot of pressure and it was really intense. And I think the secret, like any relationship, is to address it quickly. Mm-hmm. Is to like go in, don't let it fester. Don't fight and then not say anything about it. Speak to each other about it.
Don't keep it aside.
And say sorry. You know, like, I'm sorry I hit you on the head with your record player. I'll get you a new record player, you know.
A new one, a better one.
A better one. It was a really crappy little plastic thing anyway. It wouldn't have hurt.
Let's talk a little bit about lyrics. I mean, you've said before about how you work on Franz Ferdinand, and we've discussed before about that music that made girls dance to. But we were dancing to lyrics that describe the scenery of a crime. Take Me Out, for example.
Take Me Out, yeah, that's true, yeah. I always love this idea that you could have music that works on different levels. Music and I guess there are three targets for me with music. There's your heart, how you respond to music emotionally. There's your feet and your arms, I guess, like how music moves you. Because to me, music is a very physical, visceral experience. Mm-hmm. I can't listen to good music without wanting to move physically to it. And also, it's music for the brain as well. It has to be for the intellect too. And I think there's often, for people who like one particular type of music, there's often a condescending attitude to music of the other side. Like people who like music for the brain will sometimes be condescending towards music that moves your feet. Or music that moves your heart. They'll sort of say, well, it's not a good lyric, but it moves my heart. You know, it's not necessarily an intellectual lyric, but certainly it moves me. And I feel, no, you've got to aim for all of these things. You want to bring all of these things into your
Move
music.
your ass and your mind will follow.
Exactly. Yes.
As an ancient philosopher once said.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you still believe that you'll never be anything you hate?
So that song, The Darker the Matinee, I guess when I write lyrics, I draw from different areas. I draw from experience of people around about me and experiences that I had. And The Darker the Matinee was about this... I used to walk home from school with this girl called Natasha Arnold. And she was about maybe 2 years older than me. And it was the most painful and beautiful unrequited love. Like it was like, she was so nice to me. She was really, really kind, but didn't fancy me at all. Like I was just this wee guy, and I was completely in love with this girl. And we used to walk to school, and particularly walk home from school together all the time, and have these really wonderful conversations. And those kind of conversations that you have in your early teens, when you're discovering what your mind is, and you're discovering what the world is, and what your perception of the world is. And I remember just writing this all down longhand, all of these recollections of these journeys to and from school. And so that song, all these lines from that song came from these recollections of this relationship.
It was a bricolage,
yes,
a mixture.
Exactly, of this and so yeah, that was...
so what was this thing, these things that you hated?
I think at that stage, like I was like a very typically boyish, rebellious young man, not young man, like a boy still, and I was talking about, I remember talking to her about like, I hate this, like I hate people that dress like that, and I hate people that think this way, and I'm never going to be like them.
I'm never going to be a Tory.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is still true, that is still true. And, but I remember her having this more kind of positive attitude. But again, I think this stays with you through life as well. You decide what you don't want to be, and that defines you as much as what you decide you are going to be as well. And yeah, Natasha always had this more positive. She was always looking for the positive, and at that time, I was maybe that cynical
Are you still
teenager.
friends with Natasha?
No, she moved away from Glasgow, and I don't know where she is now. So, yeah.
Unlucky. Who was your hero when you were growing up? Was someone from the music industry or someone else?
I don't know. Heroes. Heroes is a funny word.
Your poster on your...
I had posters on the wall. I had the Beatles on the wall, and there wasn't one particular one, like I liked all of them. The Dead Kennedys, I had them on the wall. I had the Specials on the wall. But when we talk about heroes like that, I think of them as figures who are an inspiration. Mm-hmm. You know, and we all have those figures in our life that inspire us to do something and make us feel that we can go beyond the ordinary life that we have. And sometimes those figures aren't the people that you find in the posters on your wall. Sometimes they are the people that are around about you. And funnily enough, my inspiration was another person I used to walk home from school with. And that was this guy, Andrew Conway. And if I say I had a hero, no, an inspiration, I think hero is maybe the wrong word. It was Andrew, because we both started playing the guitar about the same time as each other. We were both obsessed with the Beatles as well. And it seems like a strange thing to say at this time, but it was at a time when the Beatles were very unpopular. There was a period in the mid-'80s, you know, like when it was very unfashionable to like the Beatles.
After the punk and post-punk period.
After the post-punk period. It wasn't until, in the UK, until maybe the Manchester sort of era, that people were kind of like, oh no, the Beatles, they were maybe all right, weren't they? Like, and it was kind of like really uncool to like the Beatles, but we were obsessed with them. And I remember we both had our guitars and we were learning our chords, and we were trying to play all these Beatles songs. and we didn't have enough chords that we'd learned to play the songs properly. So instead of doing the obvious thing and work hard and practice and hurt our fingers and learn how to play the songs properly, we used the chords that we could play and just wrote our own songs instead.
Three chords is avant-garde.
Well, yeah, 3 chords is all you need, isn't it? Actually, 2 chords. One chord is all you need. Yeah, and there was an easiness and a naturalness with Andrew. And I guess that was the first time I had that experience. You know what I was talking about earlier with the band? Where you have this feeling of trust and respect and stimulation and inspiration. And that was the first time I had it. It was with my friend Andrew. And it was so easy to write, and he inspired me and made me want to do it more, and I inspired him, and together it was kind of, you know, it was like somebody shooting a bullet between 2 walls really close to each other, just kind of was like bouncing back and forward, like until it was like explosion of energy. And I thought at this time when I was 14 or 15 that we were going to have this band and it was going to conquer the world, because we used to write songs so quickly. He used to have a little 4-track, you know, like the little cassette 4-tracks. We used to make albums on his 4-track, and we would make an album in a week, and then we kind of go, all right, okay, let's make another one. And we were so prolific. And at the beginning, it wasn't amazing, but the songs started to become quite good. And then so Andrew, he was like, everybody knows this kid at school. He was like the brainiest kid at school. He was like super intelligent, like incredibly intelligent. And when he was 15, he went to university to study astrophysics. And he turned around after he was at university for a year, and I was still at school, and he said, yeah, I think I need to stop making music now because it's getting in the way of my science. And I just remember at the time just being like, I don't understand this. Like, why do you want to stop doing music? Like, it's the most important thing in the world. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, oh no, the way I felt about music was how he felt about the cosmos, about the stars, and studying this in mathematics. It still baffles me, like how someone can
So
feel
suppose
like that about mathematics.
you don't even know where Andrew is right now.
Well, I do know where Andrew is. Yes, yes, I do. Andrew and I are still good friends, and when I'm back in Glasgow, we go out for food and we see
Have
each
you
other.
ever considered the importance, the weight of the responsibility when you are the person on the poster on the wall of someone else's?
Yeah, it is a responsibility. And it's a responsibility to not be a dick.
Simple as that.
Basically, just don't be a dick, you know. And also, it means as well, don't be a dick when you meet people.
Okay.
I'm not going to say who the band was, but I remember when I was in another band, like a band before Franz Ferdinand, we opened up at Tea in the Park. Tea in the Park was like a big festival in Scotland, a bit like Rockwave in Athens. And we were first on the bill, and my little sister came along, and she was 15 at the time or something like that, and there was a very famous English band were headlining the festival. And I remember her going along backstage and getting the autographs of all of the different members of the band. Like, she spotted the drummer and she went, oh my God, his autograph. And then the bassist, and then the guitarist. And then she couldn't find the singer. Then she saw the singer and she went up to get his autograph. And he saw her coming, and he didn't even say anything to her. He just turned to his security guy and just kind of nodded to her. And the security guy literally picked her up and chucked her out. And I just remember thinking like, oh, that was like a minimal amount of effort that would have been required, even just to sort of say, I'm sorry, I don't really feel like signing anything at the moment. And I hate to say it, but he was a bit of a dick when he did that. And it was a good lesson. And
Lesson 1, stay late at the restaurants. Lesson 2, don't be a dick. Okay, I will name some random years of your life, and I want you to remember what kind of music were you listening at the time?
Okay.
Let's say 1988.
1988. So that would have been when I was still doing stuff with Andrew, towards the end of that. And so, yeah, I'd say the Beatles would probably be the main. The Beatles, the Dead Kennedys, the Specials, the Smiths. I loved the Smiths as well when I was about that sort of age, about 16, yeah.
It was right after their breaking up.
It was, yes. Like, when did they break up? Was it 87?
I think so.
I think it was, yeah.
82 to 87. It's
I think that's right. I loved that band. Not immediately. I loved. Yeah, because I was also into like really twangy sort of stuff, like rockabilly and that sort of stuff, like in the Cramps and that kind of thing. I remember a friend of mine, Grant, was trying to get me into the Smiths, but I didn't like Morrissey's voice.
Yeah.
And
how do you feel about him today?
How do I feel about Morrissey now? It's interesting, isn't it? He's a fanny, isn't he? Like you know, he says some stupid stuff, like some really really stupid things, and some of it's quite appalling, like his sort of like racist comments and things that he comes out with from time to time. And I'm sure there's the odd person here as well who is a Smiths or former Smiths fan who feels embarrassed when he says things and they feel associated with him. Sometimes I feel he's saying it just to shock people. I think he's always been a confrontationalist. And so I think part of that is him as an older man trying to upset people who are younger than him.
Does it change the way that you listen to their old albums or their songs or the notion you have about them?
Not at all, not at all. It's funny, somebody was asking me about this the other day as well. When I studied literature for a while, and the first thing that we learned when we were studying literature is that there is a distinct difference between the narrator and the voice of the actual author themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to dismiss all art that was created by assholes, then there would be very little art of worth
Lesson 3.
to be enjoyed. Yeah. So, yeah, Morrissey can be an asshole, but I still love the Smiths.
1997.
So I would have been in Glasgow, been after the Corellia split up. I was playing with the Yummy Fur.
Nice band, by the way.
Oh, you know the Yummy Fur?
Yeah.
Yeah. So So I'd say I was listening to that a lot. What other kind of stuff was I listening to? I'm trying to think what contemporaries. I guess I was still listening to a lot of things that were happening in Glasgow at that time.
Were you into Britpop?
I was into elements of Britpop. I didn't, because at the time I lived in Glasgow and I used to promote bands in Glasgow. I used to have this club called the Kazoo Club and Club 99P. And we had a very strong and distinct scene in Glasgow. And in this, particularly in that pre-internet age as well, we felt detached from what was happening in London. And this London scene felt very English, or specifically very Southern English. Yeah. And it felt very different
all
from
this
what we
cool
would do.
Britannia rhetoric.
Yeah, we felt Scottish. We didn't feel London. And there was always a bit
felt
of
independent.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue. But we felt very distinct from what was going on. And there are bands from that era that I still love. Like, I think Pulp are an amazing band. Jarvis Cocker is probably the greatest lyricist of his generation. Damon Albarn, I still think, is a really strong artist. It's more like, as a press concoction, it didn't really appeal to me, but there were good artists in amongst it.
2010.
2010.
10 years ago.
Yes. Who was I listening to then? I'm trying to think who was around at that point. God. Who?
Franz Ferdinand, he's saying. You were touring a lot.
Yeah, I was touring a lot. I'm trying to think what else I was listening to at that particular point. I can't remember off the top of my... I mean... Actually, I know what. I first got into cumbia about 2010. I'm going to say cumbia.
Cumbia.
So cumbia is the music from Latin America. It's got this kind of like strange loping beat. I remember shortly after, like 2010 or 2011, we played in Peru for the first time, and I remember first coming across a lot of this music, this cumbia and chicha music, and I still love this. It's really cool. We just played, when we finished our last tour, we went to Peru and to Bogota, and when I go to these places, I always try and go record shopping. And when I come to Athens, I like to go record shopping. I like to go to Monsteraki and go to the record shops and find some Rebetica. But when I was here, I was looking for cumbia records, so I literally got about I think it was like 105 old 45s, things that you can't find
Anywhere else.
you can't find it on Spotify. You maybe find it on YouTube if you're lucky, but like I love this. I still have a bit of that collector brain as far as records go. I still love records.
And today, this morning?
This morning, what was I listening to? I guess I was listening to songs I'm going to play later on. So I listened to The Cramps.
Okay.
I listened to some Patrick Cowley. And actually, you know what? I'm going to surprise you all later on. I'll let you hear what I was listening to earlier.
Let's go back to Franz Ferdinand. Is it unfair that every Franz Ferdinand album is doomed to be compared with the debut?
No, that's fine. It is funny because, like, if you have a band that makes an explosion with the first record, then yeah, it's quite a thing to follow up. But for me, the Franz Ferdinand debut record doesn't really feel like my debut because I made so many records before that. I made a record with the Amphetamines, a record with the Yummy Fur, a record with the Corellia, and all these records with Andrew. So in a way, that feels like the record that was in the middle of my output. So it doesn't really bother me.
What's the main difference? What's the main point of evolution for the band in this trajectory, in these 15 years?
I think to evolve as a band, there are two things that are really important as a band. You have to retain your identity and do something new. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but if you understand that and keep it at the core of it, then everything else follows easily. Because you don't want to make a record where people listen to it and kind of go, is that Franz Ferdinand? But that doesn't sound anything like them. But at the same time, you don't want to make a record that sounds exactly like your previous record. The reaction that you're aiming for, whether you get there is another story, the reaction that you're aiming for is somebody to listen to your record and kind of go, oh, is that Franz Ferdinand? They're doing something I've never heard them do before.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've read somewhere, that you like bands being predictable.
No, I don't know. I don't like bands being predictable. I like knowing that you can recognize a band. Mm-hmm. Like if we rewind all the way back to the band that I loved when I was a teenager, the Beatles, the one that everybody loves and blah, blah, blah. If you look at the records, like if you put the needle on any groove of a Beatles record, they sound so, think of how different something like It Won't Be Long or Can't Buy Me Love or something, think of how different that sounds from what they were doing in 1968. It sounds totally different, but it sounds completely like the Beatles. Another one is David Bowie as well. Like Bowie, you listen to the records, they sound so different as they went on. Another band is Sparks.
But they're still Bowie.
And they still sound like Bowie.
There's
Sparks
this saying,
as well.
there's old wave, new wave, and there's David Bowie. Yeah.
Right, and it's same with Sparks as well. Like you listen to their records and the stuff that they did at the beginning sounds so different, but it always sounds like them. And I guess that's what I'm aiming for.
Was it a dream that came true when you formed this super group with the Sparks, the FFS?
It was like a funny accident.
With a dentist.
With a dentist, that's right.
Okay, you have to share that story.
Yeah, so I'd first met. I don't know how well you're acquainted. There's a band called Sparks from America, and we made a new band called FFS a few years ago, and with Sparks, and we'd first met them in 2004. They'd come down to one of our shows, and at the time we'd talked about making a record together, and it never happened. We were too busy, things were crazy. And then literally 10 years later, I was again in Latin America. I was in Uruguay and played in Montevideo, and I bit into I can't remember what it was. It was like
fight at the bar.
Something bad that was too hard, and I broke a tooth. And I had this, and it was so painful. And and we were flying the next day. We went to San Francisco, and our tour manager said, I know a good dentist. I know somebody that'll know a good dentist in San Francisco. Wait till we get there. In fact, what he said was, my friend is the tour manager of Huey Lewis and the News. I know this guy. He knows Huey Lewis's dentist, and he's really good. Apparently, he'll fix your tooth. So, so I waited until I got to San Francisco, and I got the instructions of where this dentist was, And it was in the middle of San Francisco, and I remember walking up and down this street because there was something, you know, sometimes when an old city, like blocks get knocked down and the numbers are in a different order, and I was walking up and down this street, completely lost trying to find where this dentist was, when suddenly I heard this voice saying, Alex, is that you? And it was Ron Mail from Sparks. And Ron and Russell had been over the road watching me, like kind of walking up and down, and both saying to each other, is that Alex Kapranos over there?
You were like an SF attraction this morning. Yeah.
And then so they sort of said, what are you doing in town? I was like, I'm here, I'm looking for Huey Lewis's dentist. Do you know where he is? And so, yeah, we got together and we started sending songs to each other. And before we were originally just going to do like a single, but we just kept on sending songs back and forward. And but we kept it a secret. We didn't tell our label, didn't tell anybody we were doing it. And then we just kind of went, surprise, we've written a record.
That's how supergroups are created.
It should be.
Are made of. Okay, let's enter the Greek part of the conversation. Tell me about Karelia. Tell me how do you decide to give that name? It was one of your first bands.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Yeah. So I had this band in the mid-90s called the Karelia. And I remember when I used to come to Greece when I was a kid, in a time in Greece when advertising was a little more restricted, when you used to drive along the coast, and we used to drive along the coast to go to the beaches, you would have these billboards repeated again and again and again and again. Like literally, like you would drive along and you would see like 150 billboards with exactly the same advert on them, saying again and again. And it would always be like some sort of image of very young people in a glamorous way, like with a beach ball maybe, and doing something active and physical and having a great life and being very healthy, all with a fag in their hand. And you'd see this name go like, and I'd just see Karelia. And so I guess the name was jammed into my brain.
Did it make an impact in Glasgow scene? The name, not the band.
I just think people are like, what the fuck's that?
What's the most Greek part of yourself? What's the most Greek thing of your personality that might reveal your Greek roots?
I don't know. There are so many things. It all gets jumbled up, doesn't it? Like there are so many. My father made sure that when we were growing up, we were very aware of our Greek identity. And we would come over and spend summers in Greece, and we would stay with my grandparents in Korydallos. We would go to the islands. When I was growing up, I would listen to Greek music. You know, when I was a kid, you know, we wouldn't play. He wouldn't sing me English nursery rhymes. Do you know the song about the climb the Todendro? You know, like going to be climbing up, and so I was always aware of Greek music. And in fact, I was talking about this a while ago. My earliest memory. Somebody asked me what my earliest memory of music was, and I remember my father putting me on his shoulders, like sitting on his shoulders, then spinning me around the room. And I must have been about 2 years old. And it was the music of Yannis Markopoulos. And it was that record that he made of all the his versions of all the sort of Cretan folk music. And I love that music still so much. Like I get a shudder just thinking about it. It's so powerful. And so this music was always a big part of my life. And also my grandfather, when I would come over, he loved singing and like would always sing, and so that was always a part of it. But as for which part of my personality is Greek, I don't know. It's hard to say.
In which circumstances you're Kapranos and not Handley?
Yeah, maybe my performance, maybe my stage persona is my Greek side, and maybe my British persona is what I have off stage. Maybe my extrovert is the Greek side.
Okay. Share some more memories, highlights, smells from your early trips to Greece, from your childhood trips to Greece. Korydallos in the island of Salamina.
It's funny, I was out last night with my uncle and my cousin. We went down in Piraeus to have some food. And I was talking about how I remember when I used to come to Greece as a kid, eating food was such a different experience from eating food in England at the time.
You mean the amount?
No, well, partly the amount, but more the way that you interact with the food and the people that are around about you. In Britain, particularly in the 70s and into the 80s, it was a cold experience. It was something to be endured.
Now you have gastropubs.
No, it's definitely way before gastro. You know, like you would sit, your food would be in your part of the plate, and you would eat it. It wouldn't taste of anything. You'd have to force it down. And God, if you looked like you were enjoying it, something was going wrong. And I would come to Greece, and it would be this completely different experience. It would be, the food would all be in the middle. Everybody would share it.
Communal spirit.
Yes, it was a way of communal eating. It was loud. People were reaching over and talking to each other. There was laughing and very animated conversation. And
loudness.
Yes, yeah. And it felt very alive. And my God, the flavor compared to British food, you know, like in Britain you boil everything until the flavor has completely gone. In Greece you put lots of garlic and oregano and make it taste really good and olive oil. And I used to love it, like it was the best thing.
Is still stifado your favorite?
Stifado, I remember these things, my grandfather used to like to cook, and like, so he used to make things like pasticcio, the gemistes, and the cotopolo and the other. My grandparents used to live above a furno. And so my grandfather would make the food and then take it down and put it in the oven and let it cook slowly. And I still love this way of cooking. It's you know, take some good, simple ingredients and put them together in a dish and let them cook slowly. And yeah.
Any chef abilities with Greek food?
Is what?
Do you cook Greek food?
I do, yes. I do like to cook Greek food. In fact, where I live, when I'm in London, I live very close to a market, and it's easy to get things like aubergine. So I was making papoutsakya, you know, yeah. So
it's my favorite.
Yeah, mine too. I love it. Yeah.
Call Alex Kapranos to make you papoutsakya.
All right, yeah. I have my own recipe. If you ask me later, I'll let you know.
Oh, you've mentioned your things about and names about your connection to Greek music. You've mentioned Markopoulos, you singing "Τα σου λάμπουν" in Barbican a few years ago went completely viral in Greek internet.
Oh, did it really? No way.
Completely.
Do you know how that happened though? Like, so a few years ago, there was a performance, this incredible performance, which was the life story of Niarchos at the Barbican in London, and the people who put on the show, they very kindly asked me to be the narrator and to tell the story of Niarchos' life. And they said, oh, since we're here, you need to join in and play some music with us. I was like, sure, that would be an honor. Are you sure? Because these guys, like Stavros was there. And so there was some, the players, my God, they were amazing. And I felt a wee bit like, oh my God, like this is an honor, but like, are you sure you want me to join you? And they said, oh yeah. And they were so welcoming and really kind. And they said, but you should sing with us as well. And I said, well, you know, my Greek's not so great. And they said, oh no, just try. So I learned the words, and they said, but you'll sing with us. We'll all sing together. And so we rehearsed it a little bit. It was like, oh, this sounds nice. Everybody's all singing this song together. And sure enough, we got up and we did the first verse, and we were all singing it together. And then when it came to the second verse, they all stopped singing. So suddenly I was like in front of this audience of people who could speak Greek very well, singing this Van Vakaris song in Greek. It was a thrilling experience, yeah.
Which other songs, Greek songs, do you sing? In the bathroom, let's say.
You know, so what I do is not so much singing, but I like to play. I still have a bouzouki as well, and I like to play some of the melodies that I hear on that. There's what's the name? There's a guy Niarchos. I can't remember his surname. The song "Minore du Teke." Do you know this? Yeah, you know this song, yeah. And like I love this melody so much, and I think whenever I'm feeling in a particularly melancholic or pensive mood, and I'm just noodling and I'm playing for my own enjoyment.
There's always a Greek song.
But this song in particular, this Minore du Teke, it's one of the most. Oh,
what fascinates you so much with Rebetiko?
it communicates something that you can't communicate with words. And I think that's what good music should do. And of course, I'm curious and I want to know what the words are, and I get my father to translate them for me, and I understand the words. And the words, they're often heartbreaking or funny, and they're good stories in there. But particularly, the music of Rembetika, it communicates this thing that we recognize when we listen to it, this thing that we all know that we felt at some point, but this thing that we could never say with words. And that's what we want from music. We want this medium that communicates what we can't do with our spoken word.
I asked you before about the most Greek part of yourself. Let's reverse it. What's the most difficult thing to understand about modern Greek culture and the modern Greek way of life, given the fact that you were born and raised in the UK? What's the thing that it's all Greek to you?
So what's kind of like alien to my way of thinking, or I don't know. You see, the thing is, for Greece, it's still very familiar. When I come here, I feel as at home as I do if I'm back in the northeast of England where I grew up, or back in Scotland. And I guess, like anybody who's like me, who's a bit of a mixture, who never really belongs to one particular place, you're never completely at home anywhere, but you're also at home in lots of places. And so I'm aware that when I come to Greece, I don't look particularly Greek and I don't sound particularly Greek, but I feel very connected to Greece. And I feel like I have an affinity with Greece, and I have a comprehension of Greece because I am so familiar with it. But it's also the same for me with Scotland, because I didn't move to Scotland until I was 10. And so I don't really sound like somebody from Scotland. But I'm so familiar with it. Again, I understand it, and
favorite places you always want to revisit?
In Greece?
Yeah.
For me, Salamis was a big place for me when I was a kid growing up. I used to enjoy spending time there. The island of Andros means a lot to me. I have very good memories. Like my brother and I used to go there, and we would just be completely wild on this island. We would explore and go hunting and exploring, yeah. And it felt, when I think of Andros, I think of freedom and able to do whatever. And I have very good memories as well, because Andros, it used to be a Venetian island, and it used to be an island with a lot of silk production. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there were all these mulberry trees across, what's the name in Greece? Muros?
Murikes.
Murikes, yeah. And it's still my favorite fruit in the world. Like if I eat a mulberry, I'm immediately taken back to climbing these wild trees with my brother when I was a kid. And we used to climb these trees to eat the fruit, and we'd come back at the end of the day like looking like something from an Argento film, you know, like completely covered in red and
So gift Alex some mura,
yeah,
if you find him
available.
Welcome. Where do you live at the moment? Do you live in London?
So I split my time at the moment. Part of the time I'm in London, and part of the time in Scotland. I have my studio in Scotland, so if I'm doing a lot of touring and I'm just back between some tours just for a couple of days, then it's easier to go back to London for a few days. But now that I'm back and I'm going to be writing more, I will be spending time in Scotland again.
How's London after the election? And what's your elevator analysis? I mean, your short analysis. Your short comment, whatever you want.
It's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare.
Really short.
Yeah, sure, okay. Yeah, that's pretty sure. I mean, what can I say about Boris Johnson? I'm sure you're all aware about Boris Johnson. When I was speaking to the guy in the taxi yesterday, like he was saying, yeah, he's like the mini Trump. And yes, he looks like Trump, and he comes across as a bit of a clown like Trump as well. But what you have to understand is with somebody like Boris Johnson, he's different from Trump. Trump is an idiot, you know, and he's kind of like bumbling his way through it. Boris Johnson is actually, his image of a clown is a very cultivated image. He cultivates this kind of like disheveled, unkempt image and of this kind of like lovable fool. Whereas in fact, he's a very calculated, right-wing motherfucker. And he's a dangerous man. I'm not going to say too much more. I don't want to get caught up in politics, but I think he's and it's something that I see happening across Europe, like whether it's not just across Europe, across the world. Like we see Orban, Erdogan, Bolsonaro, Trump, all these characters. In France, I was in France. We were recording our last record when it was the election there, and the two people were Macron and Le Pen. Le Pen it was two people between Le Pen and Macron. I think we live in a frightening era.
Signed, sealed, delivered. So, shall we pass the mic to the audience?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Να το έχουμε μικρόφωνο να δώσουμε στον κόσμο ή να περάσω εγώ κάποια από τα δικά μας. Εδώ, είναι μπροστά ο κύριος, θέλει να κάνει μια ερώτηση.
Hello, Alex.
Hey.
First of all, I would like to say that you have been a really big inspiration to me, and Franz Ferdinand as well, musically and not only. And I would like to ask you, since you've been a very prolific writer, you are in a successful band, and you were a tour promoter yourself 20 years ago, now that we are heading in a new decade of music, what advice would you give to all those young bands trying to make it big like you did back in the early 2000s? How do you think it works today? What would you change? Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks for your question. I think I don't want to give specific advice because everything evolves and it changes so differently. Like the wider music industry, etc. It's so different from how it was in 2002 when we got our band together. Instead, I'd say, don't aim for the big time. It's like when I was talking about when I thought I was never going to make money from music. It was the greatest thing that happened to me in my life because I made music to bring me reward and to bring the people around about me, to do it for fun, to do it for enjoyment, to get some kind of thrill from it. And if you make that your goal, then it will draw other people to you. If you make something that's good, people will come to you. Don't set out with the aspiration that, like, I've got to convince these people to like my music. Make something that's good and people will come and appreciate it in that sense. Also, the other thing is as well is make it something that's, enjoy the communal aspect of it. Enjoy making it with your friends. When I was talking earlier about the scene in Glasgow in the early 90s, it was so good because it was a group of friends all making music together. And with our band as well, it's the best experience to share with other human beings. And if you share it with good other human beings and people see you enjoying this, then people will come to you.
So all you need is a glimpse of love and some appetite to do good things.
I think, yeah, keep your eyes on the love. Definitely.
Appetite for distraction.
You're welcome.
Άλλος. Οι άλλοι.
Hello, Alex. Hello, Panagiotis. Great to listen to you. So, for me personally, but probably for all of us here, the debut album of Franz Ferdinand was one of the top albums of the previous decade of the Zeros, and especially for indie rock. So my question is, what were the top albums of indie rock for this decade that finishes now for the 10th, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. Gosh. I'm trying to think.
Franz Ferdinand released 2 albums on this decade.
I'm really bad at this. I feel very much on the spot, and I can't really think. My mind. I'm very sorry. There are lots of records that I love. Okay, I can talk about maybe I can talk about bands that I love that I've really enjoyed. I really like Metronomy. I think Metronomy are a great band. I love what they do. Bands that I've worked with, I loved the Cribs. I guess they were more when I worked with them in the previous decade. I loved what they were doing.
You produced for them.
I produced an album with them. I've always liked what James Murphy does, like with LCD Sound System. And maybe he had a big impact on this last decade. You know, like I think James really has. And in fact, on both decades.
Even with his absence or his retirement,
It was very interesting, that, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, I don't really care about that. I don't care about the noise around it. I just care about the music that he made. And,
his comeback album was amazing.
But also sonically, like I loved what he did. And sometimes like it's other figures as well, and also Philippe as well. You know, Philippe Zadar, who we worked with on our last record. Like I've got so much respect for Philippe and the records he was involved in. I'm sorry, I can't give you specific examples. I just went totally blank there.
Next. Έχουμε ή περνάμε, σας αποχαιρετούμε. Σας αποχαιρετούμε. Άρα, έχουμε εδώ, μπροστά.
Easy question.
Okay.
When should we expect a live from you in Athens?
If there are any promoters here tonight, come and invite us. I would love to come back. It's been like 12 years or something like that. So pass the word around. We would love to come back. I mean, I don't think we're going to be touring again for a year, but nobody's asked us. So like when it's time, I would love to come back. So
do you have some plans of releases for the next few months, for 2020?
Like I said, we just finished our touring. So I don't think something will come out in 2020. Well, no, I think something will come out, but not an album yet. And there'll probably be songs towards the end of the year. And then 2021 is probably when there'll be another album, I think.
Okay. Bring Franz Ferdinand back to Athens. Any other questions? Okay. Τότε ας του δώσουμε ένα μεγάλο χειροκρότημα.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.